Hello, okay, for those of you returning to the channel, welcome back, and for those of you that are new here, that have just stumbled upon this video, then thank you for joining me. And if you find yourself wanting to stick around to follow just some random Welsh geek ramble on about film and TV, then please hit that subscribe button. It will mean an awful lot to me. And so yeah, welcome to my spoiler-free review of action thriller Shelter, starring Jason Statham. It wouldn't be January or February if we didn't get a Jason Statham action movie. It's directed by Rick Romanois, who also directed Greenland, which I quite enjoyed. I haven't seen the sequel yet, and I didn't realise until doing some research for this review that Rick Romanois is a former stunt performer, appearing in movies such as Universal Soldier, The Last of the Mohicans, Last Action Hero, The Crow, Gone in 60 Seconds. So yeah, I didn't realise that. But it also explains one of the highlights within this movie for me personally. One of the sort of the standout elements, you could say, of Shelter, but we'll get into that in just a moment. So Shelter follows Mason, a former government assassin living in reclusive isolation on a remote island off the Scottish coast. When he rescues a young girl from a deadly storm, his quiet existence is upended and he finds himself forced out of seclusion to protect her from dangerous forces tied to his violent past. As their bond grows, he must confront those determined to kill him and face the very organisation he once served. So, I do always look forward to a Jason Statham movie. You know, sometimes I do want to just turn my brain off for a couple of hours and just be entertained and have some fun. And, you know, his last couple of movies, like Beekeeper for one, you know, I actually quite enjoy Beekeeper. It knows what it is, it leans into that, and I found it to be quite fun. You know, it's aware of itself, it doesn't take itself too seriously. And, you know, we kind of expect that when it comes to Jason Statham movies. I do believe that Jason Statham is someone who is, you know, he's got his moment coming, just like with Stallone and Copland and Arnold Schwarzenegger with T2 and even Dwayne Johnson with the Smasher Machine. I do believe that with the right material and the right story, Jason Statham has his moment coming. I really like him as an actor, and you know, he's usually the strongest element of these experiences, of these movies. You know, he carries a lot of these films, and it's because he's such a likeable presence. I always like, you know, what he's doing within the frame with his character. Yes, a lot of them are quite familiar or generic, and, you know, we've seen them before, but there's just something about how he brings his characters to life I just enjoy, and I just gravitate towards. I just like, you know, watching a Jason Statham movie. And this is one of those experiences. Shelter is one of those experiences where I feel like they were definitely attempting something here a lot deeper and more complex than what we are used to with a Jason Statham movie. And, you know, the attempt is there. Unfortunately, this is another one of those experiences that I feel like I've had over the last couple of months, where we get a story, we get a movie that has potential, that has the ideas, but just really fails at bringing those ideas to life, in sort of really kind of fully realising those ideas, and they just seem to struggle in their execution of those ideas. And unfortunately for me, Shelter is another one of, you know, it's another one of those movies, it's another one of those experiences that just stumbles, because it just struggles to really bring to life what I felt like they were touching on you within this story, especially when it comes to its themes. And maybe that was intentional, maybe they wanted this movie to just allude to sort of more complex and human themes, and wanted it to be a little bit more of a straight up action film. But for me, at the same time, I felt like they were trying to make this more than what it was alluding to. Like, it only ever alludes, or it only ever flirts with its themes that they are exploring here, I felt. And it's all very surface level. In many ways, it reminded me of Leon, a very good late 90s movie, but does not go as, you know, it doesn't dig as deep into its themes like Leon does. It's not as nuanced, you could say, or complex as Leon is. And I felt like that was one of them, that was one of Shelter's biggest failures here. And that was giving us something that we could get really swallowed up in and immersed into a way that sort of was emotionally intense, not just fun and not just exciting, but something that really got us involved emotionally with its story and behind its characters. And it wouldn't have been, such a big problem if the movie did sort of really lean more into just being a straight up fun, entertaining action thrill ride. It's the fact that the attempt is there to dig just a little bit deeper into its themes and what they are exploring with the character of Mason and this little girl that he saves from this storm, Jessie, and sort of, her history, who she is, where she comes from, and where Mason comes from, and just that kind of the relationship that forms here. There is nothing more to it, but I feel like the film alludes to something deeper, and I feel like that's brought to life beautifully, by the way, when it comes to the music. I absolutely admired the score in this film. That the score within Shelter was one of its strongest elements, and it's definitely a score that also alludes to something deeper going on within its story thematically here. I felt personally, there'd be certain moments where a piece of music will really add something more, add a layer or depth to a certain scene or moment that kind of just gave it a weight, and it was a little frustrating because it's still just alluding to something that, or an aspect of its story that doesn't fully come to life. And I just felt like a lot of that sort of was in its execution with its story and the writing. I think the writing was this movie's biggest issue and is the reason to why we never really get a truly satisfying experience where it sort of just pulls you in with these characters and swallows you up within these characters' journeys. It's there, the potential is there, but the writing, I felt, for me personally, it's one of its biggest problems here. And just and just in how the entire story, the narrative was constructed. It's quite clunky on many different levels, whatever that is, how the story plays out or how certain moments play out as well. There is a clunkiness to how everything is sort of constructed you within the frame that just it just stopped me from really fully getting immersed into the story. But with all that being said, I liked this movie. To a degree, I enjoyed it. I did somewhat have fun with it. Yes, I was frustrated by it because it was attempting to do things with its story that didn't quite sort of fully come to life and didn't quite work. But overall, I just found myself really appreciating what I felt like they were attempting here with this story. Jason Statham, I like Jason Statham, but I think the one thing that, again, that you could feel that's kind of really sort of dragging everything down, and even with Jason Statham and what he's attempting, is the writing. But for the first, say, 25 minutes of this movie, we don't really get an awful lot of dialogue, and a lot of it is just these shots of Mason, in this lighthouse on this island. And there are some really nice shots throughout this film, by the way. I actually found myself really appreciating the cinematography and just how certain scenes looked. And so visually, I really liked the movie, and I think visually the film was saying an awful lot. And that is something that I really liked about the first, say, 30 minutes of this movie, where there is very little dialogue, and the film is allowing us to sort of just get sort of immersed within this setting on this island with the character of Mason, and it's not relying too heavily on exposition. That's the one thing, that's the one bit of praise that I will give this movie when it comes to the writing, is apart from one moment that involves Bill Nighy's character that really stood out and it made my eyes roll and I just cringed. Other than that one moment with Bill Nighy, it's a moment that you'll know when you see it and hear it, because it's like, other than that moment, the film doesn't, or tries not to rely too heavily on exposition. And when it does, I felt like it worked. It wasn't too on the nose. It wasn't too clunky. And so, but once the story really sort of escalates and evolves, that's when I feel like you could really sense that the writing maybe isn't quite where it needs to be, and that is why thematically what they are attempting within this story or within this experience is not quite working. And so to just touch back on the visuals for a moment, I feel like, again, it was one of those elements of the movie that I felt was its strongest, and something that I found myself really admiring, you know, just how the camera would be used when we are first sort of introduced to the character of Mason. It's just him looking out towards the sea, and it's a lovely shot of him, just so you can see there's a lot going on within the character mentally within that very brief moment. And there's a lot of those moments dotted throughout the film within sort of different situations and circumstances and all of that, and that is something that I really liked about the film in what they were attempting to do here visually, you know, in telling this story. This is one scene, for example, where our characters, Mason and Jesse, they're going into London for the first time, and it's a moment where they're sitting in the car and you see the lights reflecting on our characters, and it's a really nice moment, but I felt like it was short-lived. And so you could see that they were attempting something here from, you know, a visual perspective that I just personally felt like they could have leaned into just a little bit more, because I felt like that's where I was really, for me personally, that's what I was really enjoying about the experience. And you've also got some real standout action set pieces within this movie. There are 3 moments that I really enjoyed. The one being a car chase scene that is really riveting, and that's a lot of that is due to how the camera is used within that moment and in how it plays out. You know, it feels like you were there with them, and, you know, it gets the blood pumping. You've also got a fight scene with the character of Mason and this MI6 agent, and from beginning to end, it's an incredible scene, and I was grinning ear to ear because you could feel the intensity behind it. You can feel sort of the desperation between the two characters. It's a very well choreographed action fight scene. And this is what I was touching on earlier on, where you could tell that the director is a former stunt performer, because this is where the movie truly excels, and it's in these action set pieces, it's within these moments that then in turn fueled my frustration, because if they had worked on that script just a little bit more and on the story and the relationship between Mason and this little girl and their past and their history and all of that, then we could have had something here that is truly special. And unfortunately, you know, like I said, it doesn't fully come to life, but there are moments like this fight scene that was very entertaining. It gets the blood pumping, it's adrenaline filled. And then you've got a club scene towards the end of the movie that I also really enjoyed, you know, between the mix of music and in how sort of they immerse us into that moment, into that club with these characters. It's an incredibly fun scene. This is probably one of those action set pieces inside the club that is a little bit clunky in its execution, but I was really at the same time entertained by what was happening as well, and in how it played out. And I think this is something that Roman Rick Ward did a really good job at with Greenland. And that is putting us, the viewer, sort of there with the characters, and sort of, you know, the overall experience might not be working when it comes to the immersion, you know, of sort of pulling us into this story, you know, and pulling us into these characters' journeys. But I do think he does a good job at actually sort of just placing us with these characters in these settings, if that makes sense. You know, within these certain moments dotted throughout the movie, which then again fuels that frustration, because the potential is there, or was there, to have something that is more than what it is. It's more than what we do finally get when it comes to this experience. And if I really want to get picky, you know, I did have some issues around how the camera would be used in certain moments. Like, it'd be a moment where they're trying to give this a scene, this dramatic edge, you could say. And, you know, they would use the camera in a way where it kind of just whooshes past from the distance or from a height. And you could sort of tell what they're trying to do, you know, but it just doesn't work for me. The way in which the camera is used in those moments and the way it kind of just swooshes by, you know, and it's trying to sort of add this kind of the dramatic edge to a scene or to a moment. For me, it just does the opposite. It just throws me out, and I'm like, oh, why did you do that with the camera? Because for the most part of this, you know, for this film or for this experience, they do quite a good job with the camera. So it's very few moments, and it is a minor niggle from me if I really want to be, you know, picky about certain elements of the movie. And then there's also certain mechanisms within the plot when it comes to how the surveillance is used throughout. I think it has a pretty good setup within the first 30 minutes. I think they do a good job at kind of setting up this surveillance system within MI6 and all of that. But then how it plays in certain moments within its story, it just didn't work. It just didn't, you know, it took away from what I felt like they were attempting in bringing to life here, which is a very gritty, grounded story. There are just certain moments within its story that kind of just broke that kind of believability for me, you know, that stopped me from really sort of believing in what was happening within the frame, and in turn would sort of just throw me out a little bit. But they were very kind of brief, small moments that were needed for the story to sort of evolve, I suppose. But it's just how it was how it was executed, really, that just didn't quite work for me, because I felt like it just took away from the realism that I felt like they were aiming to achieve here with telling this story. So overall, this was quite a clunky experience that had a lot of potential. It just unfortunately didn't quite come together to create an immersive, thrilling and intense experience from beginning to end. There are moments that are intense and I was always invested, but as a whole, you don't feel like you have truly been on a thrill ride or a journey with these characters that has a weight, that has a clout, that has a punch. There are things that I liked about it that I found myself enjoying, but they are moments. And it's another frustrating experience for me because it is there. There is so much potential there. And as a result, I couldn't help but really appreciate it for what it was, or what it was they were attempting. You've got Jason Statham that once again, you know, carries a lot of this experience, but they just failed to bring alive a compelling and emotional story that has a weight to it that could have truly made this experience something special, like Leon, for example. I felt like that's what they were attempting here. They were attempting to bring something similar to movies like Leon. And unfortunately, it kind of lacks the complexity of those movies and kind of the nuance of those films. It's attempted. It is definitely attempted. And like I said, I really liked what they were trying, you know, or what they were pulling off from a visual perspective, especially the first 30 minutes of the movie. But unfortunately, it doesn't all come together to create this one sort of consistent journey or experience where you get swallowed up from the beginning and you just, you know, you're there emotionally invested and an experience that just pulls you in. But I was always locked in because I was, I suppose, invested in what was being attempted. And so I like this film. I mean, it might sound to many of you that, you know, listening to me, there's a lot of negative here. You might think or feel that I hated this film. I really didn't. I actually quite liked it. It's a movie that I would definitely revisit again soon. I will probably get it on physical media because it is one of those movies that, you know, there is so much potential in it and there's so many elements that I did like and that I found myself appreciating, but that connective tissue that is the writing and just in how it sort of plays out, just it doesn't quite work, or what it was that I feel like they were attempting with these characters' journeys and with this story, just for me personally didn't have a weight or depth there to give me something that just that gave me a satisfying experience. So yeah, I think I've rambled on enough about this one. I do recommend it. Check it out. I think, you know, you might go out and watch this and enjoy it a hell of a lot more than I did. But I did like it. So they are my thoughts on Shelter, and I will be giving Shelter... yeah, they are my thoughts on Shelter. But what do you guys think? Have you seen it yet? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you agree or disagree with anything I've said? And please let me know in the comments below and let's get a discussion going. And if you've made it this far into the video, then thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. In fact, you deserve a medal if you can sort of stick it out until this moment in the video to listen to me ramble on. But it does mean the world to me. And remember, if you are new here and you find yourself wanting to stick around to follow just some random Welsh geek ramble on about film and TV, then please hit that subscribe button. It will mean an awful lot to me. I've got an awful lot planned for the channel. I will be doing a lot more live content. When it comes to reviews, there's a lot of cinema releases this weekend. You've got Wuthering Heights, you've got Crime 101, you've got Whistle, so there's a lot to choose from, and I plan on catching them all. But what review would you like to see from me first? Which film? Wuthering Heights, Crime 101, or Whistle? Let me know. And anything you would like to see from me when it comes to this channel, you know, like live content or games, you know, I'm planning on streaming video games. I mean, are there any particular games you would like to sort of see me stream? Let me know. So yeah, that's it from me for now, guys. Thank you so much for supporting the channel, whatever you be liking, commenting, subscribing. It means the world. I've just crossed 600 subscribers. And so yeah, just a big thank you to those most recent subscribers for joining me on this journey. So that's it from me for now, guys. Thank you all for watching. I really do appreciate it. I'll be catching you guys soon.